Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know we love to get our hands dirty digging into the latest business thinking, and today we're tackling business models. Those systems that basically decide how companies make things happen and make money doing it. We've got some great excerpts from Harvard Business Review articles for this deep dive.
It is interesting how we can get caught up in, the product or service, but the real secret sauce often lies in how the whole business model works.
Right. It's like the best product in the world can only go so far if you don't have a solid business model behind it to make it really work. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a business model? I think it's a term that we hear a lot, but can be hard to really define.
You can think of a business model like a story, the story that explains how a company actually operates. It needs, compelling characters like your customers and partners, and a plot that lays out how the company is going to solve problems, and most importantly, how they'll make money.
So it's kind of like a recipe for success. You need the right ingredients and the right amounts, or it just won't work.
Exactly. A winning business model needs to pass two tests. First, the narrative test. Does the story make sense? Will customers buy into it? And second is the numbers test. Can the company actually make a profit using this model?
Makes sense. I mean, you can have the most amazing story in the world, but if the numbers don't add up, it's not going to be a sustainable business.
Exactly. Think about those subscription box services that were so popular a few years ago. The ones sending you everything from razors to makeup to snacks.
Oh, yeah. I definitely hopped on that bandwagon. What about them?
Well, a lot of them had great stories. They offered convenience and personalization and the thrill of discovery. They aced the narrative test for sure, but then so many of them really struggled to actually turn a profit. Their costs were really high. They had problems keeping customers, and they often just totally underestimated the logistics of, building a whole subscription business. So they failed the numbers test.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's not enough to just have a cool idea. You really need a business model that can support it for the long term.
Absolutely. And speaking of cool ideas, remember the iPod? It wasn't just a cool gadget. There was a whole new business model built around it.
Yeah, that little white rectangle, it totally changed how we listen to music. It was a huge deal.
So let's break down the key elements of Apple's success using the iPod as an example. First, you have the customer value proposition. What problem does it solve for the customer better than anything else? In the iPod's case, easy access to digital music on the go, sleek design, easy-to-use interface. They nailed it.
They totally did.
Then there's the profit formula. How do they actually make money? They kind of flipped the traditional razor and blades model on its head.
Wait, a reverse razor and blades model? I'm listening.
So think about it. The iPod, the hardware, was the razor in this case, a high-margin product. But the blades, the music downloads from iTunes, were actually low-margin. However, by making the iPod such a must-have device, they locked people into buying music from iTunes.
So they made the money on the device itself, not on the stuff you buy for it. That's pretty clever.
And finally, there are the key resources and processes. Apple was amazing at design and manufacturing. They created a user-friendly iTunes store and seamlessly integrated all of these different pieces, and that is really what made the model work.
So they weren't just selling a product. They were building a whole ecosystem, a whole new way to experience music. So we know that a good business model is really important. But how often do companies need to completely reinvent themselves?
It's not always necessary. Sometimes a company's existing model is good enough to adapt to new opportunities, like Procter & Gamble and the Swiffer. They didn't need a new business model, just a new product that fit within their existing framework.
Right, that makes sense. But there are times when a complete, overhaul is needed, right? Like when the ground is shifting under their feet.
Oh, absolutely. There are a few scenarios that just scream reinvention time. Like when there's a big opportunity to serve customers who are currently excluded from a market.
Like how Tata Motors created that super low-cost nano car for the Indian market. They saw millions of people who couldn't afford cars and built a whole new business model around affordability.
Perfect example. They totally disrupted the market and made a huge social impact at the same time. Another scenario is when some brand new technology comes along that needs a whole new model built around it.
Okay, I think this is where it gets really interesting. Digital music was just sort of out there before the iPod came along, right? It needed a business model like Apple's to really take off.
Exactly. The technology existed, but it took a visionary business model to unlock its potential. And of course, sometimes the basis of competition in a market shifts and the old way of doing things just doesn't cut it anymore.
So like when the rules of the game change completely.
Right, like think about Hilti, the power tool company. They realized that the market was moving away from just buying tools outright, so they made a bold move and switched to a fleet management rental system, which addressed the evolving needs of their customers and allowed them to stay ahead of the curve.
Okay, so this is making me think, what happens when you're doing well with a solid business model and then suddenly someone comes along and offers something very similar, but for free?
Yes. Competing against free. It's the nightmare scenario for a lot of companies and can be super tricky to figure out.
Right. Do you try to match them?
hmm
Ignore them? What's the playbook here?
Well, the first step is to really analyze the threat. How quickly is this free competitor gaining traction? Are your paying customers jumping ship? That'll help you understand how urgent the situation really is.
So don't panic immediately, but definitely assess the situation. Are there any real-world examples of this playing out?
Oh, tons. Think about what happened to newspapers when online news and classified ads became free. That was a major disruption.
Wow, yeah. That's a classic example of how free can really shake things up. What about software? Have we seen similar things play out there?
Definitely. Microsoft Office has been facing increasing pressure from free alternatives like OpenOffice and Google Docs. It's a constant challenge for them to keep their market share when there are free options out there.
Okay, so let's say you are facing this free competitor head on. How do you fight back? What strategies actually work?
Well, there are a few proven approaches. One that's really popular is the freemium model.
Freemium. Yeah, I've seen
Huh.
that one. You get like a little taste of the product for free, and then
Oh.
if you're hooked, you got to pay to unlock all the cool features.
Right. It's a smart way to get a bunch of users initially and then convert at least some of them into paying customers. Think of all those mobile games that let you play for free, but then offer in-app purchases for like extra lives or special powers.
Oh man, don't get me started on those. My willpower is definitely not strong enough sometimes. What are some of the other strategies?
Another one that works well is cross-selling or bundling. You offer the free product as a loss leader to drive sales of other related products or services.
So like when HP used to practically give away printers if you bought a computer.
Yeah, exactly. Or think about cable companies that offer free premium channels for a limited time to hook you on their service.
It's all about creating that strategic ecosystem where the free product is like a gateway to more profitable offerings. That's pretty clever.
One more for ya. The two-sided market approach. Here, you actually make money from a different group of customers who value access to your free users.
Okay, now you're really making my brain work. Can you walk me through an example of that one?
Think about Google and Facebook. They offer free services, but their real revenue comes from advertisers who want to reach their massive user bases.
So it's like a symbiotic relationship. Everybody wins. This deep dive is really showing me all the ins and outs of business models. It's way more complicated than I thought.
And we're just scratching the surface. We were just talking about companies competing against free, but there's an even bigger trend emerging that changes everything. The rise of platforms.
Platforms, I hear that word everywhere these days. Honestly, though, I'm still not quite sure what it really means.
Yeah, a lot of people are confused about it. Basically, platforms connect different groups of people or businesses and facilitate those interactions between them. Instead of directly selling a product or service, they create a marketplace where others can connect and do business.
So it's like creating a digital ecosystem,
Right.
bringing different players together.
Exactly. And some of the biggest names in business are doing this. Think about Amazon. They started as an online bookstore, but they didn't stop there.
Oh, yeah. I remember ordering a book online seemed so futuristic back then. Now I buy practically everything from Amazon.
They realized that their real strength wasn't selling books, it was connecting buyers and sellers. They expanded way beyond books to become a platform for pretty much anything you can imagine.
It's amazing how they've become like the everything store. I even get groceries from them sometimes.
It's a perfect example of the power of platforms. Another great example is Uber. They don't actually own any cars.
Wait, they don't?
No.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot about that. It's like a fundamental part of their business model, but I never really thought about it.
That's the thing about platforms. They often operate in the background, seamlessly connecting things without us even realizing it. Uber's platform connects drivers and riders, creating value for both groups.
That's the beauty of it, right? Platforms create value by enabling these connections that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Yeah. It's a totally different approach to business than that traditional model of producing and selling stuff directly.
I'm seeing how this is a whole new ball game.
Huh.
So how do companies actually become these multi-site platforms? Is there a set path they follow?
There are a few common paths, and each one has its own challenges and rewards. One way is connecting customers to third-party sellers. Think about Intuit and QuickBooks, the accounting software.
Okay, yeah. I use QuickBooks for my freelance work. What do they do?
They realized they could build a platform by letting developers offer apps within their software, basically opening it up and turning it into a marketplace.
That's smart. They use their existing product to build a whole new ecosystem.
Right. It gave QuickBooks users access to a ton of new tools and services and created a new revenue stream for Intuit. It's a win-win.
Okay, so I'm getting it. What are some of the other ways to become a platform?
Another path is connecting different customer groups who need each other. This might sound a little weird.
Go ahead. I'm all ears.
Imagine a hair salon that adds a matchmaking service for its clients.
Wait a minute, a matchmaking service in a hair salon? That's a crazy idea. But you know what? It kind of makes sense. People want to look their best at the salon. Maybe they're already thinking about meeting someone special.
Right. The salon already has a built-in audience of people looking for connection. It's all about finding those creative ways to connect customer groups that can benefit from interacting with each other.
Okay, this is great. What's the third path?
The third one is connecting products to connect customers. This one's a little more abstract, but a great example is Cards Against Humanity, that party game.
Oh, I love that game. It always makes for some hilarious moments. What do they have to do with platforms, though?
They actually created a whole separate platform called Black Box, where they sell back-end services to help independent artists sell their products. Things like credit card processing, customer service, shipping.
So they're using their knowledge and expertise to help other creators. That's really cool.
It's also super strategic. It gives Cards Against Humanity a new revenue stream and helps them build a community of creators around their brand.
Okay, I'm seeing the pattern here. Becoming a multi-sided platform can be a powerful move, but it also sounds pretty complicated. What are some of the challenges of managing these ecosystems?
You're right, it's not easy. One challenge is managing all those relationships with third-party sellers or providers. You have to make sure they're offering quality products or services that fit with your brand.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want to ruin your reputation by associating with bad actors or low-quality stuff.
Right. And you also need to be careful about cannibalization.
Cannibalization. Is that when a platform partner starts competing directly with you?
Exactly. Sometimes it's good to allow some overlap, especially if it makes the overall experience better for your customers. But you got to be really careful.
I bet. So with all these challenges, why are platforms such a big deal?
Because platforms are changing the whole way companies compete. They represent a fundamental shift from that traditional pipeline business model to something totally new.
Okay, pipeline versus platform. I'm ready for this showdown. What's the difference?
Well, think of a traditional pipeline business, like a factory. They control the resources, they optimize a linear process to make and sell stuff. It's all about efficiency and control.
Okay, yeah, that's like the classic model. A well-oiled machine churning out products.
Right. But platform businesses are different. They're all about orchestrating those interactions between outside producers and consumers. Their most important asset isn't physical goods. It's the network itself.
So it's less about controlling the resources and more about connecting the people who have them.
Yeah, exactly. A pipeline business wants to own the entire process. A platform business wants to enable and facilitate. Totally different mindset.
Okay, so I'm starting to get it. Can you give me like a real-world example of this platform magic at work?
Sure, think about Apple and the iPhone. Their success wasn't just about the phone itself. It was about making it a platform with the App Store, connecting all those app developers with all the users.
Right. The iPhone was cool, but the App Store made it huge. Suddenly you had millions of developers creating apps for millions of users.
Yeah.
Total game changer.
And that's the key takeaway here. Companies that don't understand how to build and leverage platforms are going to get left behind, no matter how big or successful they seem right now.
Wow, it's a pretty powerful thought. So how do these core business model principles, customer value proposition, profit formula, key resources, how do they apply to platforms? Are they different?
Well, the principles are the same, but how they're used is different. With platforms, the value proposition is often about connecting different groups of users and making it easy for them to interact. Take Airbnb, for example. They don't own any properties, but they've built this huge global platform that connects travelers with people who have places to stay.
Right. They've totally disrupted the hotel industry, creating a whole new way to travel and experience different places. And it's all about creating a smooth and trustworthy experience for both sides, the hosts and the guests.
Exactly. And their profit formula is all about those transaction fees. They take a cut of each booking, basically facilitating that exchange of value between hosts and guests.
It's so simple, but so brilliant. They're not selling a physical product, they're connecting people and capturing value from those interactions.
And what about their key resources and processes? They need really powerful algorithms to match guests with the right places to stay, strong trust and safety measures to protect everybody, and a thriving community, to foster that sense of belonging. It's a different set of skills and assets than like a traditional hotel chain would need.
It's like they've written a whole new rule book for success. And I think what's so interesting is how platforms can shake up industries that seem completely untouchable.
Totally. We've seen it in music and media and transportation and more. Think about how Netflix changed the whole cable TV model, or how Spotify revolutionized how people listen to music.
This makes me wonder what seemingly stable industry in my life might be next to get disrupted by a platform.
That's the million-dollar question. Every business leader, and really every consumer too, should be asking that. The world is changing so fast, and platforms are a big part of that change.
This has been an awesome deep dive. We covered a lot of ground from the basics of business models to the rise of platforms. What are some key takeaways you want to leave our listeners with?
The most important thing to remember is this. Business models are constantly changing. The rise of platforms is just the latest chapter. To thrive in the future, businesses need to be adaptable and innovative and really understand the power of connecting people and resources in new and creative ways.
And never forget about solving those real problems and creating value for your business and your customers.
Absolutely. It's been great exploring all of this with you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep innovating, keep connecting, and keep your eyes open for those platform opportunities.